All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Conahan, ACRL's Manager of Professional Development. Thanks for joining us for today's ACRL Presents webinar. Our goal for these webinars is to bring our colleagues together to discuss issues of broad interest and importance to the academic and research library community. Thanks for being here with us today. Just going to start with a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. The session today is being recorded, and we will email out the link to the recording shortly after the webinar. And the recording will also be posted on ACRL's YouTube channel. You can use chat to comment and ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and we will have time at the end for Q&A. So please use the chat for that purpose. And closed captioning is available. You can just click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen if you need to enable captions. Today's webinar is Youth Services to Academia, Transitioning Positions Within Librarianship. During our session today, 3 former youth services and school librarians who made the change to academia will discuss and share their experiences. I'd like to thank our presenters for being here with us today. Today's presenters are Justin Crossfox at SUNY Buffalo State University, Mary Camilla at University of Buffalo, and Joel Shoemaker at Methodist College. Joel, feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Youth Services to Academia, Transitioning Positions Within Librarianship. We'd like to thank the Association for College and Research Libraries for allowing us all to gather together on this topic. We're very excited to chat with you today about our experiences working in school, public, and academic libraries. We do plan to have time at the end for questions and answers, but we'll also be monitoring the chats should something come up along the way, so feel free to ask questions at any time.
Wonderful. So here is our agenda for today's session. So we're going to start with some longer form introductions about us and our journeys from youth services to academia. Then we'll discuss the similarities between youth and academic librarianship that helped us transition smoothly, as well as the biggest differences we've experienced since making the switch and how we adapted. Finally, we'll present some of our best advice for making a career transition before segueing into our Q&A session.
Right. So, hi, everyone. My name is Justin Crossfox. Thank you again for having me. So a little bit of background about me and who I am and where I came from. I was in public libraries for 18 years. I started as a children's librarian, where I did programming for birth through 6th grade, collection maintenance, collection management, outreach to the schools and community, talking about summer reading, all that fun stuff, and then moved up through as a branch head, kind of expanding my programming into the whole community at large. I transitioned about mid-career over to academia, and now I'm user experience and outreach. I teach a credit-bearing Lib 100 class. I teach one-shot library instruction. I spend a lot of time collaborating with other departments and trying to get everyone to do stuff for the students and and I work events for students and faculty of the library. I'm kind of all over the place.
Hey, and my name is Mary Camilla. I'm currently a student support and engagement librarian at the University at Buffalo, which is part of the SUNY system, although a different school than where Justin is currently at. And just to give you a little bit of background about me, I went to UB, the place where I work, for my library degree in their library and information science program. And I actually, while I was in the program, was really torn between pursuing an academic library track or a school library track. I started out in an academic library track, and then through, conversations with faculty, mentors, friends, family, decided to go on a school library track, figuring that with all of the certifications and other formalities that went into the school librarianship program, it would be better to take that route so that I can ensure that I could work in schools if I wanted to, with the door kind of still being open to pursuing academic librarianship if I changed my mind down the road. Spoiler alert, in attending this webinar, you kind of know how things played out. But I was lucky enough to get my first librarian job at a charter school while I was still finishing my degree. So my first 2 years as a school librarian were at a K-3 charter school in Buffalo. It was a really unique experience because it was a brand new school. It was the second campus for an already existing charter school here in Buffalo, but as a founding staff member, I actually got to help build the library from the ground up, which is a really cool but very intimidating experience for your first job. And through those 2 years, I found that I thought I would prefer working with older students. So after I finished my program, got my certifications and all that, I started applying for high school library jobs and did accept a position at another local school here in Buffalo. And I worked at that job for about 2.5 years, which unfortunately coincided with the onset of the pandemic. My first year in that job was 2019 to 2020. So I kind of was, navigating a new job, new student population, and, the new normal of COVID and everything that happened in schooling during that time. I felt like I never got to settle into that job. So returning after COVID shutdowns was pretty challenging. I started to ask myself if I really thought that the position I was in was sustainable. In addition to the typical struggles that come in a high school environment, I was traveling between 3 buildings. I never really felt super connected to any of them. But I wasn't looking for a new job in earnest when I came across the posting for what is now my current job here at UB. The position really seemed like a good opportunity to transition because it was focused on first year information literacy education. So I felt like my work in high school provided a lot of transferable skills, teaching information literacy to high school seniors versus first year undergraduates, not too different. Took the plunge and applied, worked through the arduous interview process. That's a big difference. I was not aware of the full day academic library interview until I was scheduled for one, but eventually started at UB in February of 2022. There's been a little bit of reshuffling in my job duties since I started, but my main duties do still comprise first year education, specifically in English 105 and ELI 105. Those are first year composition classes. UB has over 20,000 undergrads, so teaching these sessions is a pretty significant lift every semester. But like Justin, I also plan and facilitate a lot of our extracurricular programming. I am also the liaison to the Department of Communication at UB. That's a relatively new appointment. And I also liaise with the University Honors College. Thank you everyone for attending today's session, and I look forward to talking with you more about all of our journeys.
And my name is Joel Shoemaker again, and I am the Associate Director of Library Services for Methodist College in Peoria, Illinois, currently. Previous to this, though, I've had experience working in public libraries, school libraries, and even working with ProQuest while in graduate school, training fellow students on how to use several of their databases. As an unrelated aside, I've written 3 books, with the most recent being a picture book that publishes June 4th from Wildling Press, and I've been a magician for 32 years. In my current position, I am the sole full-time employee supervising 2 student workers for a very small private college for the health sciences, with the vast majority of students majoring in nursing. Our library has more than 5,000 print materials, but circulation of those materials is pretty low. On the other hand, we have a robust selection of electronic material available through 70 databases with pretty high usage given our student base. We very recently started embedding the librarian into the nursing curriculum, and at the moment, I teach some rudimentary research skills in 6 of our classes, both online and in person.
Ha 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 ha. So sorry about that. So we're gonna start by talking about some of the similarities between youth and academic librarianship. Because a lot of the similarities are, some of them kind of jump out at you, and some of them were kind of new. So one of the first things that we're going to talk about is the similarities of programming in general. So there's, as Mary has also mentioned, a lot of what we wind up doing as outreach is programming to get students in the door, to kind of reach them, to be that friendly face. So there's a slide later on this. I'm sorry. I just got nervous, everyone. So yeah, so adapting some of our old programming, Mary, if you want to jump in.
Sure. So yeah, I have had programming as sort of a connective thread throughout my positions. When I worked in elementary school, I collaborated on events like Cultural Heritage Nights. I ran our book fair, a classic. In high school, I also ran book clubs. I would do seasonal reading promotion events. And even though programming isn't always a focus in academic libraries, I've been able to leverage the experience I had in school libraries to start bringing engaging extracurricular programming into UB's libraries. I'm going to talk about this more in detail later, but I've been a part of forming a small dedicated working group to plan and execute library events throughout the academic year, which has been really rewarding. Another connective thread that the three of us saw as we got together to plan this presentation was statistics. I've kept some type of statistics in all my positions, although the type of statistics has differed a little bit. In school libraries, because you are, managing the full space, I kept circulation statistics, instruction statistics, really anything that we were doing, we were keeping some kind of statistics and typically submitting an annual report to administration. Now, as more of an instruction and liaison librarian within a university library system with over 100 employees, I don't keep any statistics personally related to the collection or circulation, but I do assist in keeping instruction and reference statistics. We document these using LibInsight. I also keep statistics in terms of like graded classes where I'm also, doing assessment and keeping records of that. Joel?
And then for me, statistics have been very similar here to what I was used to providing as a public library director. For example, here I provide a gate count, and at all of my branches previously, we provided the Board of Trustees with a basic door count. While I don't really provide programming stats here myself, I do provide my supervisor with other information such as database usage and interlibrary loan requests filled and unfilled. If anything, for me, the major difference is that stats were publicly and readily available when I reported to the Board of Trustees at the public library, and here they just go to my supervisor, and I'm not sure where they go after that. And then the next point on collection development, it's very similar here in that I pitch the procedure to faculty and staff at the start of every semester as, I really don't know anything about the health sciences myself, so please tell me what print materials you might want in the library. And not just print materials, we've gotten some other things by doing this, such as a faculty member that wanted buzzers so that they can check them out for their class. And we also have 2 full-size skeletons that circulate. At the public library level, we took purchase requests all of the time. So I thought here, why not involve the community? And so that my collection becomes more useful to them, because again, I might know librarianship, but I don't know the health sciences. So while the collection here itself is much different than the public library that I've worked at in the past, I do feel like the way that I've developed it is pretty similar in some ways.
I haven't done much collection development work in my academic position, although that is changing. But collection development was one of my favorite parts of school librarianship. I typically use publications like Booklist, School Library Journal, as well as tools integrated into Follett to inform different collection development decisions. And in my new shift to the liaison to the Department of Communication here, I will start to be responsible for collection development for that department. So this will be, a similar duty, but a little bit of a different focus. Instead of focusing on leisure reading, I'll be investigating and purchasing research resources like books, databases, journals, etc., mostly upon faculty request, but also definitely starting to familiarize myself with more of those resources.
All right, and as we move on, another similarity was kind of the teaching and marketing of instruction. So for me, coming in, I was kind of, nervous about teaching until I kind of realized that my children's background and programming background actually really helped me with instruction a lot. It helped my classroom management. It helped me develop and plan and design my approach for what I was going to teach. So that was kind of, even though I was terrified of teaching for the first time, so to speak, I realized the through line of already designing and planning programming that was trying to teach a skill to K through 6 translated pretty directly. And then also, I would have to market those programs in the public library and like make little flyers, and like Canva has been wonderful for me, kind of making actual flyers about, hey, this program. So it kind of, even though one-shot instruction is different in the execution, the planning and that I have to design it and then go out and market it is really kind of a through line for me.
Yeah, I had a similar experience to Justin. I taught a lot as a school librarian and I continue to, but really the marketing is what makes it happen. I can have a great idea, but if I don't find buy-in from a collaborator, nothing comes from it. So I've really found in all the environments that I've worked in, putting yourself out there, advocating for you and what you can do really helps to get buy-in from faculty members or subject area teachers in high school. So just to give a couple examples, when I was working in a high school, a library colleague and I were investigating new information literacy frameworks, and we were really interested in Stanford's civic online reasoning curriculum. But we did not have a place to start integrating that into instruction. So we visited a social studies team meeting, basically gave our elevator pitch about the curriculum and ended up getting buy-in from a government teacher who integrated our civic online reasoning instruction into his civics unit. So I've been able to apply those skills in my new position at UB. And just to give a very recent example, I have, as the new liaison, been reaching out to communication professors, and I've already gotten to collaborate on 2 classes. One was a graduate class on meta-analysis, which is a really exciting opportunity as someone who's mostly done first-year undergraduate education. But I've also stayed with that, and I've got a first-year undergraduate seminar scheduled coming up later this semester with communication. So marketing has really been the key in getting that sort of engagement.
And then another kind of similarity between the two is dealing with budgeting. I'll quickly talk, Joel can speak more to budgeting stuff, I think. But for me, coming from public to a public university, and I know that I'm kind of in a different realm, I'm so used to how state monies have to be spent and how public monies have to be spent. So that was a real boon for me because a lot of the other quote academics who were coming in were used to different types of funding and oh sure you can buy cookies and I'm like no you can't spend state dollars on cookies like you have to use foundation so that was a great gift or great skill to bring over that was very similar for me.
For me, at the public library, budgeting had to be approved by the Board of Trustees. And here, my budget is approved by administration and ultimately by the Board of Directors. The process is similar in that, I compiled a spreadsheet and made the numbers be what they needed to be. The difference is that here I'm not the top of the food chain of the college.
I think, did we just lose? Oh, is Joel back?
Did I get cut off?
We just missed you just at the very where you're at the top. You're no longer at the top of the food
Okay.
chain.
Yep. So the reason that I had this in hopefully that doesn't happen again. I'm really sorry. The reason that I had this in similarities from my perspective was because it's still a similar process in creating the budget, even though the way it's approved is slightly different.
I will say kudos to Joel. That was the fastest Zoom drop off and recovery I feel like I've ever seen. So very impressive. So we're going to shift now to talking about some of the differences we encountered when moving from youth services or school librarianship to academic library positions, and hopefully be able to share a little bit about how we were able to adapt. So first up is the user base. So we all, you can guess, had large changes in the user base, which we were providing services to. So for me, as I've said, I started out with kindergarten through 3rd grade. Then I was in a high school that was actually grades 8 through 12. So then I moved to academia and I was mostly working with 1st-year students. Then I worked with some other undergrads. And now with my new liaison role, I'm working with some upper division undergrads as well as graduate students. So each kind of progression has definitely required me to think about different populations and their needs and how I can best serve them. So that's something that I'm finding myself constantly having adapt to, although I do feel like I'm really running out of new things to adapt to, which is nice. I've really seen them all.
And certainly the user base is different here at Methodist, and I think maybe different than many other colleges as well. We're a relatively niche institution serving a very non-traditional student base, with the average age of the student being 27 years old here. And we're also obviously very limited in scope as far as majors and minors, and really just interest in general. The health sciences is what we have here, with very few electives outside of that. And so our collection naturally reflects the user base as well.
Right. And my user base also kind of changed in my children's career, which was a big chunk of my librarianship. I was really birth through sixth grade. So I was dealing with the kids. And then as I went into running a branch, it was more kind of all ages, but the age group that I rarely found, if anyone from public is that traditional college student age group was usually missing. I would see the little kids and I wouldn't see them until they had kids and they would come with their kids and then and then I would see the seniors. Um, and now I'm mainly first generation students and I came from a place that was very um how to put this, very affluent. And now I'm in a place where I have a lot more students who are more reliant on services like food pantries and state aid. So it's just been a very different group.
And then secondly, we put reference questions are different here. I think it's top of mind for me because I just voted yesterday, but reference questions at the public library, often I remember things like, when is the local election and where do I vote, things like that. And we were able to look that up for people. And there were obviously many other obscure things. I was reminded of the text service Cha-Cha. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but I actually did technically work for them for a little bit, answering those questions. So it was similar to the public library experience for me. And so the reference questions here are almost entirely research focused and focused on things like helping find articles and navigating databases and things like that.
And here, what's fascinating about Buff State, we have a librarian reference desk staffed with a librarian from 9 to 5, which is waiting for drop-ins. But almost all of our questions now come from students making appointments. And I think that kind of came through COVID. They'll make an appointment even for one-on-one or we'll send them a Teams link and it's much less pop in, here's a question. Even questions that while there are more kind of research and paper-based questions, even kind of general things, they're kind of fitting us into their time more, which has been interesting. So they'll say, can you meet with me at, 7 o'clock at night and I'll throw a Teams link and answer a reference question from my couch. So that's a big difference.
Yeah, I didn't answer a ton of reference questions as a school librarian. If I did, they were typically pretty informal, a student just coming up to my desk for like a reader's advisory need or asking where to find a book. Once in a while, I would have a research consultation because my school had an IB program. But now here at UB, formal reference hours are a part of my job. So we don't physically staff a desk like it sounds like Justin's institution does, but we have scheduled on-call reference. So I'm scheduled usually 2 to 4 hours a week to be on call for any reference questions that come in person. Plus I staff our chat reference, which is open 24/7. We just staff it during working hours. But I would say the majority of questions we get come in on chat as opposed to, drop-in hours. So I think that's a shift that a lot of people are seeing. And usually the questions now in comparison to high school are much more research-based, typically finding a specific resource, building an effective search strategy, and a lot of times they end up in explaining Delivery Plus, which is our interlibrary loan system to students.
I think, am I back? Okay. Another difference for me, or another difference that we were kind of talking about was schedules in general. In public, I had a very structured 2 9 to 5s, 2 10 to 6s, 1 1 to 9 every third or second Saturday, Sundays. It was a very, very structured. You showed up for your shift at this time and left at this time. And there's a lot more flexibility and also a lot more bleed through in my role now. If I have students that if there's a paper due on Sunday at midnight, I'm checking my emails and going through my stuff all weekend to make sure that I have answered students' questions. Um, but I'm not really, quote, expected to be here on the weekend, but I'm here for things like open house or chores or, tree plantings or anything that's kind of student centric. So kind of I'm here a lot more, but I'm also flexible and I can grade papers on the train, which is a different thing where in public there was none of that for me at least.
Yeah, so in comparison to school libraries, my schedule in an academic library is much more flexible. Obviously, schools are typically guided by a bell schedule, contract hours, that sort of thing. So in this, I also have a little bit more flexibility and freedom within building my own personal schedule. So I no longer have scheduled student supervision or any sort of formal duties. My position also has some work from home flexibility, which I really enjoy getting to take advantage of sometimes. I tend to keep pretty normal working hours, 8 to 4, 9 to 5. Sometimes I have to teach late during the semester, but there's the flexibility to, come in later on a night that I'm working later. So I really, really have enjoyed the increased flexibility of this position. And similar to what Justin's saying, I've come in a couple times on weekends for events, prospective or accepted student days or other activities, but that's very infrequent and usually on a volunteer basis. So it's been great.
And mine is, again, maybe a little bit different in that I was the director before, and so I had a much more flexible schedule and a lot of meetings that were offsite or elsewhere, like with a focus on being visible in the communities that we served. And here, I'm still working on being visible in the faculty staff community, but I definitely am expected to be here Monday through Friday, 7:15 to 3:45 or something. I don't technically clock in or out, but it's at least on paper, this job is that much more rigid with scheduling. And I also rarely have meetings or anything offsite or need to leave the building. So mine is a little bit less flexible, I would say.
All right.
Oh, it's still me. And with the next point is tenure. And all I'll say with that is that we don't have tenure or anything for my position here. And so most of this time will be spent by Justin and Mary talking about their tenure experiences.
So yeah, tenure was shocking for me coming from public. I didn't know. I knew that it was something that kind of was in library land as like some librarians are tenured, some aren't. When I interviewed, I saw that it was tenure track and I was like, I think that's what I want. And I asked, are there some tenure and some non-tenure librarians? Because I didn't want any of that like kind of um animosity between like I've heard stories of some of that. So I was like, okay, but I'm like, I'm bright and I have experience and I can kind of figure this out. Um, and it is bananas, to put it mildly. Um, so when I came in, uh, I have a group of fellow faculty members who kind of show me the ropes. They kind of help me build my tenure package, and I had no idea it was like multiple binders and that they were like, save every thank you card. I was like, what are you talking about? And I told them one day, I was like, this is kind of like smoke and mirrors. Like I'm doing all of this work and I have no idea if any of it's on the right path. And they were kind of offended. They were like, well, we're supposed to be telling you how it is, but it's also your thing. And I'm like, it's not smoke and mirrors because of you. You're trying to lead me through this. It's because I just have no idea. I put this out into the ethers and don't know if I have a job next year. So that was an interesting thing. We, at a comprehensive, I'm not in R1. Um, so our bylaws of what in our research, we also have added in creativity. So for me, that is fantastic as someone that doesn't have a huge ton of research background. My creative works count. So that has been like I was told, Mary will have a different story, but I was told, make sure you have something, you really want something published by your final tenure review. They really would like an article somewhere. And I think that's very different from yours, Mary.
Yeah, so my position is also tenure track. And I didn't really weigh that in when I was applying for the job. As I said, I applied because it seemed like a good transition in terms of the duties and everyday work. So I also did not really have an opinion or a deep understanding of tenure during the interview process. And really, it took a few months, maybe even a year of working here to really feel like I understood how everything worked and what to focus on. I had a lot of similar feelings to Justin and like shifting to this evaluation timeline that happens only, every 2 years, which obviously it's not. You have a lot of feedback and guidance along the way, but it does sort of loom large in the future. And yeah, so because UB is an R1 institution, there is a big push for scholarly publishing. The PRB wants to see solo authored, peer-reviewed articles, stuff like that. When you go up for the big reappointment, they also want to see national service, including elected positions. Certainly intimidating when taking it on, and I definitely struggled with the mindset shift of, school library. It's very practical. What are my lessons for the day? I plan them, I assess them, I move on to the next thing. Whereas being on the tenure track, in addition to having those practical daily duties, you're also expected to think in broad theoretical terms about your work and the profession and what your whole path and story as a librarian is, which on some levels is cool. But again, when the deadline comes into play, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's certainly a roller coaster. People close to me in my life have definitely seen there's times when I feel like things are going great. There's times when I feel stressed. Right now I'm in a pretty good spot, so it's probably that we're having this presentation now. But the things that really helped me to kind of feel like I was on the right path were joining national committees and getting involved in them. I'll talk in a couple slides about that. As well as in terms of knowing I needed to get writing, I applied for any and all relevant calls for book chapters, article proposals, etc. I got a couple accepted last spring, wrote them over the summer, and like now I've got a couple of things underway. It feels much more manageable to continue that on going forward. So everything has felt a little bit more manageable since I got things underway.
Next, we've come up with a few ways that can assist the process of switching roles from public or school to an academic librarianship role. And you're watching this presentation, so with regards to point one, hopefully you already know about the great work that the Association for College and Research Libraries does, as well as that of the American Library Association in general. Membership in these institutions has opened up a wealth of resources and information that have helped all three of us in navigating the change of type of work.
Yeah, so I can speak to a little bit of national involvement. So when I was a school librarian, I was a member of AASL, but I wasn't really involved on the national level. But now, since making the switch, I'm a member of ACRL. I attended the ACRL conference in Pittsburgh last year, and I've also gotten involved through committee work. So I serve on the instruction section's Instructional Technologies Committee, where I've gotten to leverage my instruction experience to connect and collaborate with other interested instruction librarians. I'll actually be taking on a vice chair role in this committee for the coming year. And then in the next year, 2025, I will be taking on a chair role, which is very exciting. But my actual foot in the door with ALA was getting involved with the new members roundtable. So that is a roundtable that helps those who have been ALA members for less than 10 years navigate the organization and profession. So I served on their communications committee. Right now I chair the communications committee, and this year I'm running for an elected office. So it's been really valuable to kind of build up my experience through this one roundtable.
You would think after all these years I could unmute myself. I'm going to speak a little bit about state. So we have NYLA, which is pretty active in New York State, but the one that I'm really going to talk about is SUNY Law, which is librarians within the SUNY system, which is State University of New York. It's State University of New York Librarians Association. And so that's been a great way to connect with people all over the state. And how I wound up, I'll go into how I connected with Joel later, but how I connected with Mary was being on a SUNY Law committee and seeing someone else from UB and starting to chat with her. She came down to campus. She invited me up to her campus, and I met Mary, and we were like, oh my goodness, we're both fairly new in this role. We're both youth services. And so even though I was looking out at the state, it connected librarians together who have similar interests and similar experiences, and we were able to kind of build scholarship out of that, out of that network through the state.
Yes, yeah, that's really awesome. SUNY Law is great for connecting far and wide because there are many, many SUNY campuses. To speak a little bit to regional involvement and how I've been able to use that as sort of a bridge between experiences, I am on a WNYLRC committee, which I know is a beautiful acronym, the Western New York Library Resources Council. So from our county, Erie County, and some surrounding counties, the high school to college committee, it brings together high school and college librarians to help in the transition from high school to college or high school to professional world. So getting involved in this committee has been a great way for me to bridge my own transition, stay connected with old colleagues, meet some new colleagues, and collaborate on how we can make, students be as successful as they can be.
And I added Rails. In Illinois, we are involved in the Reach and Across Illinois Library Systems, which is an organization composed of libraries of all types, as well as the College and Research Libraries of Illinois, CARLI, which is a very helpful membership organization composed entirely of academic libraries. And being a member of both, there's a wealth of professional development resources at our fingertips, many on demand to review at our convenience, which has been nice. Lastly, for this, I added the National Network of Libraries of Medicine and the Medical Library Association just because this is a health science focused institution, but also I thought it would be helpful to mention the NNLM specifically because it is free to join, and I joined it at my public library well before I knew I would ever work here. It's just a really great organization that offers a free certification program among many other things with multiple levels for those that are like me and just want to feel like you're always going to school.
And one of the things that a great way to help you transition is to learn the new jargon. As librarians, jargon we have pretty much everywhere and all the time. I didn't realize I had been out of an academic setting for a solid 15, 16 years before coming into this job. I didn't remember what a provost did. I had no idea. I was in a meeting with the provost and he said he was talking about persistence and I can't even persistence and retention. And I was like, what's the difference? And turns out one is year to year and one is semester to semester, I think. Um, so it's all I'm actually working with, and this is a great way. I'm working with a staff member who is a secretary in the honors college to create a glossary of terms that are for new people coming into academia. Um, so people like me who are practitioners, so to speak, before coming in, and for staff who's coming off who've never worked in colleges in general, and then also stuff that's specific to Buffalo State. So we're newly a university. We have schools because we used to be a college. So figuring out that jargon will help because you'll be in a meeting and like three-quarters of the stuff went over my head. And so if you kind of go through some academic jargon, it's helpful.
And a surprising amount of my job has become helping students form and answer PICO questions, which I knew nothing about coming in here. And so this is specific to research and nursing and is a question that involves population and intervention, a comparison and an outcome. And there can be a silent T for time as well. I won't go into any detail about what the PICO question is or that process, other than to say it's something that took me a while to really understand. And even 2 years later here, I'm still trying to get the hang of it. So that was something that I had to learn.
Girl. All right. In transitioning, what I found useful, I'm not gonna go through all of these because of our times, but um really just adapting stuff that I had been doing in my back pocket as a children's librarian. Really came in handy. I used to do family trivia. Now I do trivia in the lobby in the library. And then other departments found me. I now do trivia once a semester for the Poli-Sci Club. Um, Pocket poetry, I used to do Shel Silverstein stuff. Now the students write their own poetry and we give it out. So kind of, I had a graphic novel chat with um, fifth and sixth graders. Now I have one for college age students. And so it literally just taking the thing and being like, oh, here's a new audience. Great.
And the same thing for me, just quickly to mention that when I got to the library in the back room, there was this like ancient, I think it's 20 years old because there's a plaque on it that says it was donated by the class of 2004. So, but it's a giant coffee pot that no one was using. So I bring it out once a month and I brew Death Wish because it's supposedly the world's strongest coffee or something like that. So it's just a good gimmick. But it reminds me of, the coffee hours that I would host for senior citizens in my public library role. And then similarly, these last two, I've had some great partnerships with our public library here. And they do a one city, one book. And previous to even my being here, we were partner with them on that. And so now I host authors in line with the one city, one book. So this year I have Honeybee on this slide because this year I just happen to know Candace Fleming, so I'm bringing her to the public library, and then the campus is just sponsoring it in name because people don't tend to come to campus for programs. So I'm able to partner with the public library and sort of like defer costs that way between the two of us as well.
Yeah, and just to echo what these two have already said, I was able to also adapt some of my previous programs to a new audience. So I would typically run a library orientation for students as like a scavenger hunt, or even during COVID as like a digital escape room. One of our most popular student events now here at UB is UB Searching, which is an asynchronous couple-week-long scavenger hunt through the library's physical and digital spaces. And then a connective thread throughout all of my positions has been book clubs. I absolutely love book clubs. The thing I probably miss the most about working in a school library is the opportunity to promote leisure reading and to do readers advisory and all that sort of stuff. So facilitating book clubs has been a way for me to continue to incorporate that into my work as an academic librarian. So our next couple of slides focus on the instruction aspect of academic librarianship. We just wanted to highlight a few tools that have applicability across library types and can be used in formal or informal instruction settings. So since I did a lot of instruction as both a school and academic librarian, I'm going to highlight two of my favorite tools, which are Pear Deck and Nearpod. Both of those are interactive slide platforms. I really enjoy using these in library instruction because typically, when we're in there for a one shot or even a couple sessions, we may not have a personal relationship with the students we're teaching. And I often find that students are reluctant to raise their hand, share out, that kind of thing. So I feel like having an interactive slide is a way to elicit participation without making students feel vulnerable. And when you compile all of those responses, you also have more options to work with in terms of demonstrating searches and things like that. So this first example is from Pear Deck. It's an add-on for Google Slides or PowerPoint. So you actually open Pear Deck in Google Slides and you can add the interactive elements to the slides that you've created there. So this example is showing you one of my favorite things about Pear Deck, where you can have the content of a slide with web content right there on the same screen. So this helps students to stay on task and not, get lost to the wider internet if you send them out looking for a source. So this was a first year lesson on popular versus scholarly sources, and I found it very helpful to be able to have all of that content housed together on one screen. Nearpod is a very similar platform. But Nearpod, you either upload pre-created slides or create your slides in Nearpod and then add in the interactive activities on separate slides. You can add open-ended questions, collaborative boards. You can embed different types of media. This is an example of what they call a draw it slide, and I was using it in a lesson on keyword searching, talking about how we can actually harvest starting keywords from a research question.
Right. And I'm not unmuting and muting myself anymore because I'm not playing that game. Sorry, everyone. One of the things that I brought over, again, I already mentioned it was Kahoot, but when it started as trivia nights for me, kind of morphed into when I was teaching my credit bearing classes, I didn't have a lot of quizzes because I didn't want to have to mark a lot of my students wrong. I wanted them to get the knowledge was my like more so than anything else. But I needed to assess. And so we would do low stakes Kahoot quizzes before each class, and then I would gauge based on how they were right or wrong. So kind of what it's being used for in other places. But it was really exciting because not only library stuff can be dry, and I wound up having a whole bunch of students get absurdly into this. I had a bunch of students from the hockey team who got like really into it. Um, And so it kind of built that community with the class as they kind of jokingly played with each other. And then when I would go into something like how to create a search string, like they already kind of had a little more connection with me because it can be dry and I don't want to, as a me, I don't want to hear people talk about building search strings. So it was useful.
And then I feel like we did use LibGuides at the public library, but their use was extremely limited, and they're certainly much more widely used here. And they seem to be so at the academic library level in general. Most of the LibGuides that we offer predate me, and I haven't had the opportunity to do much updating as of yet. So I'm going to defer to Justin and Mary on this one.
And I will quickly defer to Mary because I'll just say, as a public librarian, I had never seen one of these things. I was like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. And then I came to an academic library, and LibGuide is another one of those jargon words that um, so I use them. Anything that I do with them, they're very, very kind of basic placeholdery. So like all the students that submit poems for pocket poetry get on a LibGuide, and I update that year after year. So it kind of works more like a static, like look at what happened back then.
And I was actually lucky enough to work in a high school that had LibGuides, so I was familiar with them when coming to a college library. And for both positions, I use them most often to create like targeted collections of resources for different classes. But in both jobs, I've also used LibGuides for more unique pursuits. So here at UB, I use them to create sort of a dossier of multimodal project options. We also use a LibGuide to host the scavenger hunt event I mentioned a few slides back. So they're a great base tool for creating different library communications, I think really in any library environment.
Okay, and all three of us seem to be able to credit our success in transitioning to these new roles, at least in part, to connections that we made while in our previous roles. So for me, I have stayed on the statewide directors listserv, where I do find academic directors as well as public and school library directors continue to communicate. And more locally, there are at least 2 monthly meetings of library directors that I might not be able to get to join in person. I still find value in receiving their emails. We've already touched a little bit on consortia, but with regards to what I've noticed, memberships in public library consortia have led to professional connections that I've used now in the academic setting. For example, my author connections that started from the public library have led to the hiring of 2 authors that I've scheduled to visit while in this position.
And as we mentioned, if you can locate regional library organizations, for Justin and myself, it's WinnieLurk, and that brings together public, school, academic, medical, special librarians, all in the pursuit of, effective librarianship in our area. My committee involvement at the regional level has been really valuable. So that's another way to maintain and build connections.
Yep. And so I'm going to kind of, now I'm going to tell a story that I teased earlier. But again, I met Mary through involvement with Sunila when we were kind of talking and figuring out, oh, we're youth services, but we're also academia now, and I was feeling very unicorny and very much less than um, coming into this role. Um, and I actually wound up reaching out. I was very involved in ALSC prior to my role in academia, and I reached out to someone that I knew from ALSC, and I was like, hey, do you know any other unicorns that would be involved, that would be willing to chat? And so that's how Joel, who now I meet in a academic setting, who also went through a children's setting. So maintaining, like not discarding those previous skill sets and networks and understanding that they can kind of rebuild upon. Because I mean, look what now the three of us can interact and share our notes. And that's been phenomenal for me.
So mentorship is another way that you can ease the transition. I was lucky enough to receive mentorship in a few different ways in my shift to academia. So institutionally, UB did provide me with 2 tenure mentors, so 2 other faculty librarians who've gone through the tenure process. And I've actually picked up a 3rd mentor. I wanted to have one that was within my specific unit in the library, so that's been very helpful for demystifying the tenure process at my institution, but also through my professional organizations. I took part in the ACRL instruction section mentor program, which was really valuable. Meeting with my mentor to share about instructional strategies, things that I needed advice on, just an open forum for sharing. She also helped to review some of my drafts of things that I wrote. And I also wanted to highlight that New Members Roundtable, who I said I'm involved with, also has a mentor program for those who have been in the profession for less than 10 years. So things like that are always great, sort of different library types. Mentorship can still be very valuable there.
And then, as Mary had said earlier, you kind of have to advocate for yourself a bit. I bring my childrensness now to the forefront, right? As much as at first I was kind of like hiding about it. And then I saw that we have a childcare center on campus. And I was like, hey, we also have a section of the library filled with books for the ed department for children. Come and do story time. And that got my foot into the door. Working with, I wound up on a committee for Bring Your Child to Work Day, which put me in contact with a professor that I'm now working on an article with. In another quick little thing, is I wrote for myself, be your own Muppet. I am not going to lose that persona. I'm realizing that for meetings, I've been in meetings where things are hot and heated and tense, right? And I don't have tenure yet, so I don't want anyone looking at me. So I can kind of be I use that childrensness a lot. And I use I came from children's so I kind of advocate for myself using that like, oh, I am something that is not the norm here. And so I don't know if that made any sense, but it made sense to me.
Be your own Muppet, our biggest takeaway from this webinar. In addition to what Justin shared, I wanted to share sort of a case study as well in self-advocacy. So when I started at UB, I saw a need for a more centralized group that focused on planning extracurricular events and programming. So I was actually able, as a new librarian here, to leverage my previous experience, took initiative to get things underway, and we have created a formalized group. People like put it on their CV and everything, SLU, the Student Library Engagement Work Group. And we now serve as the point of contact for events within the libraries. We get contacted to represent the libraries at, tabling events and things like that. So making yourself known in your new environment is really valuable. As I was making my notes for this presentation, I feel like this is really our most important piece of advice, because nobody knows your special experiences or skills unless you show them off and advocate for yourself and for your unique perspective. So I think it can be very valuable.
I think that's the end. Thank you for listening to us prattle on a bit about our experiences working in public and academic libraries. And while we're obviously all some level relatively new at this work, we'd love to take this opportunity to answer any questions that you might have.
And I'll also take this opportunity just to advance to the next slide, which has our contact information. If any of you are interested in reaching out to us individually, our email addresses are here.
I see some comments. I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but we'll give folks a few more minutes to see if they have any other things that they want to ask you guys about. Oh, here we go. Here's one from Julie. How long did it take before you felt comfortable in your new roles and stopped thinking, what in the world did I do?
I still kind of feel that way. I'm still navigating this space two years later, and it's just because I'm not super academic in personality, but I do find that making most of the faculty and staff are friendly here, so that has been helpful. But yeah, I still feel like feel that way a little bit.
I'm going to agree with Joel. I'm very like there are moments where I literally say to people who are on my tenure review, I'm like, what did you do? Like, what? I'm bringing the mascot into the library and giving out buttons that say Benji caught me reading. Like, this is not, is this supposed to go on my tenure package? And they're like, your outreach, and we hired you because we wanted your perspective. And that like So now it's kind of becoming a joke, and it's just fake it till you make it. And I'm just gonna be this and bring the mascot, and you know, yeah. So hopefully soon yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say similar. There's definitely times where I feel like, oh yeah, I've got this down, and then times where something happens and I'm like, oh goodness, I don't feel like I belong, or something imposter syndrome creeps in. But I would say probably took a solid year to really feel like I had made the shift and feel more comfortable and more like I had a grasp on things. But what was nice for me was coming from a really teaching heavy school library job to a really teaching heavy academic librarian job. That transition was at least smooth. So I had that to sort of rely on while I still figured everything else out.
Thanks. We have another question. Someone is asking, I'm curious how everyone is navigating the pace. Coming from K through 12 and community college librarianship, the university pace has been different. So thoughts on that?
So I don't really, I think for me, my question is more about like, what do you mean by pace? Because when I was in when I was in children's, the pace in the summertime was nothing but slammed in lines. And then the pace in September and October, there were moments where I was like, oh, I don't need this many librarians. Um, so pacing has been different there. And then but in terms of pacing, like I feel like everything has been, I'm one that I need deadlines, and sometimes things have been open-ended for me. And so that's been a bit like, oh yeah, just make sure this gets done by year 7. And I'm like, that's not great for me. So I'm not sure if I answered the question.
I think you did. I saw some follow up, and they were all saying that the pace is a little bit slower here, and I would agree with that. It's just different. For me, like the summers are just wildly different, like you said, and then also just getting used to academic terms has been interesting. And I think like almost the time seems to go faster here because it's like 16 weeks, and you're moving on to something new, and all of that. And so I don't know. So like how we've gotten used to it, I think I just let life happen and I am now used to terms.
Hey, we have a couple more questions coming in. What advice would you give to someone with social anxiety entering an academic librarian role that will require class instruction?
I don't necessarily have social anxiety, but I will say, as an example, I was very nervous about this, so I scripted it, and I think it does help. Like I'm not an authority on research databases, so I had to learn a lot of that for the purposes of teaching the 6 courses that I pop into, and so I think like it might be helpful to at least start with a script and maybe also offer video instruction. I've offered that, and a lot of teachers have been appreciative of receiving videos. And in that way, if I sound like a bumbling moron, like I probably do for a little bit of this, then I can go back and edit it and stuff like that. Might help.
Yeah, I would also suggest it depends on the size of the institution where the position is at, but if there's other instruction librarians there that you can connect with and maybe observe them, become more comfortable. But even within professional organizations, getting involved with the instruction section, any group where you can talk to other people that teach, I find that a lot of librarians, including myself, like are very nervous about teaching, but also very passionate about teaching. So it's a really common topic that comes up, and I think you would find a lot of community there and some really solid advice.
Okay, we have a few more minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Justin, were you going to respond as well?
No, I was going to say I have nothing really to add. Thank you.
Margot, did you say there was another question? I don't. Are you guys hearing Margot? Am I frozen again?
No, I think Marco's muted.
Oh, I forgot to unmute. I'm sorry. Okay, so here's the question. How do you handle or navigate the different mindset values between academic versus public? For instance, the ranking elitist system of academia.
I'll let one of you take that.
So I'll jump in because I I mean specifically chose this school because of what what it was. But I, not to keep using the term Muppet, Disney's going to sue me, but I really just lean into my Muppetness, right? And like I was in a meeting recently and I was like, SLOs are all about gatekeeping. And people were like, what? And I kind of lean on my publicness and my like, I say that probably aren't always great because I'm like, I'm a practitioner. Um, I think I lost my train of thought, but that's sorry.
Yeah, it's not something with an easy answer, but it is definitely something that exists. And, being aware of it is the first step. And then, getting to know your institution, getting a feel for how things are. But it's tough to give an easy answer to that question. I just try to look at, I don't have a PhD, I don't have an extreme subject specialty, but I think my teaching experience is what sets me apart from a lot of other librarians, and my, pedagogical knowledge and even my teacher certification that I got as part of school library. And I know the value that I bring. And even if, somebody else may perceive that differently, you've just got to, at the end of the day, know yourself, your worth, your strengths, and things like that. And then, like, obviously we can fight for institutional change is the big goal at the end of the day, but in the day-to-day, just know your value, know your worth.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's, I lost my train of thought on the last thing is that I find when I was going into practitioner, I find that partnering with a lot of people that I've been building out a network of people that are kind of student first. Um, and so that's been kind of super helpful. People who kind of have my same vibe, and then I partner with them, even if they're in a subject that I have absolutely no idea about anything
Hmm.
in. And that vibe kind of runs through. And so you kind of build your community out like that. I'm super lucky um, that like so much of this place is so student focused. So it's been, but I've used that kind of as the we're here for access.
And I see we're a little past 2 o'clock Central, so we probably need to wrap up to respect everyone's time. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to Justin and Mary and Joel for sharing your experiences. And thank you for all the great questions from the participants today. It's been a great conversation. We will share out the recording real soon, so please keep an eye on that. And again, just thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We'll see ya.